There's just so much.
You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.
You think you're here for a no filter, but actually, because we're competing against you at the podcast awards,
This is a stitch up.
Actually just an ambush, Tonya Harding style.
You're actually just going to lock the door right now and keep us in here so we can't do any more
And
podcasts.
harm you physically.
Okay, look,
But not your knees.
you know what they say, get competitive and stay competitive.
true.
That's what we're doing.
We thought we needed a different marketing plan this year, so we just thought
Take the
we'll
others
take
out.
out the competition. One at a time, starting with you bitches.
You're a
All
smart
right,
woman.
well, what comes next?
Well, from Mamamia, I'm Mia Friedman, and you're listening to No Filter. There's this reality show called The Bachelor, and what usually happens on it is that a guy dates a couple of dozen women, and then he chooses one of them to be his girlfriend after the show is finished. And then usually they break up shortly after that, sometimes even before the final show's aired. Sometimes, though, it works out differently. Sometimes it works out. Not so much lately, but back in 2017, when Laura Byrne moved into the Bachelor mansion, along with a bunch of other women who were looking for love or fame or both, Laura pulled off a rare double act. Because she didn't just meet her partner on that show,
The first time I met Laura, I really knew there was something special happening.
who, by the time you're hearing this, will be her brand new husband, Matty J. Laura also ended up meeting her work wife, a woman who would change the course of Laura's life almost as much as any guy ever could. That woman, Brittany Hockley, had a very different Bachelor experience.
I have a heavy heart right now, Brittany. It's both of them. It's both of you are amazing women, and I just trying to find my way in that cloud is too much for me right now.
It was singularly awful because she made it through to the final two, just like Laura did. But she didn't get a happy ending. The Bachelor in her season decided to choose, well, he chose nobody. And Brittany couldn't have possibly known it at the time. But being rejected on national television ended up being a double win for her. She not only escaped the wrong guy, she gained the right woman, her business partner and life wife, Laura. A year after that humiliating episode aired, Brittany and Laura started a podcast together, which I'm not going to name because I'm very competitive and it's a successful podcast and I hate them for being so successful. And sometimes they even beat us when we're both nominated for the same awards. And why have I even invited them on my show? I really don't know. Look, mostly it's because they're lovely, which is also annoying, and because I'm hoping that all their fans will want to listen to this show to hear them, and I can steal them. This is No Filter with Mia Friedman. Did I mention I'm also petty? I'm kidding, sort of. Their podcast is called Life Uncut, and it's about relationships, and so is their book. We love love. We're all good mates. Off air and also on air. Today they join me on No Filter to discuss a bunch of topics and also to have a couple of small cries. I asked intrusive questions about Brittany's breakup.
We both agreed that it wasn't working, but I would have tried for probably a little bit longer, I think. Every part of me knew that it wasn't going to work, but I just wasn't ready to let go.
And about the envy that can sometimes crop up in friendships when one person is living a life that the other one maybe is longing for.
I get really sad because I'm like, I look at her family and cry from happiness, but I cry because I'm like, I wish I could have that feeling. And I see her with the kids and I'm like, I wish I could have that.
So that's my trying to fit everything in around the life that I've chosen, which is to be a mum, and I love every part of that. But it just means that not only do your priorities change, but you become the bottom of the priority list.
We had an unexpected and surprisingly emotional discussion about loss in a way that no one saw coming.
I thought I was damaged goods. Like the first time I was like, there's something wrong with me. Like my body can't have kids.
And we also talked about the unique emotional head scramble of dating in your 30s.
I have always had this level of anxiety when I'm dating or I've met someone. That happened with Jordan. It happens with people now. If I'm dating them and I'm like, oh, like that could be something. I have a level of anxiety that they could be it and that I would never be with anyone else again. And I don't know what to do with that feeling.
And a bunch of other things as well. But before we get to that, let's start at the very beginning. How did you guys meet?
Well, Laura.
We did a little TV show.
Laura obviously had a wonderful, beautiful romantic success story on The Bachelor. She got Matty J, you know, they had the happy ending. I was on The Bachelor the year after with the Honey Badger and the first person to win The Bachelor and not win anything because I got dumped on national television at the end.
When you just said the Honey Badger, I just had a moment of going, what? And then I remembered.
Ladies, I'm looking for love when I find my pants.
It feels like, for me, as a viewer, a really long time ago and that we all just accepted that there was this man that was called the Honey Badger.
He's still around and he still calls himself the Honey Badger.
He will be the Honey Badger for eternity. Sometimes I forget his name. I'm like, what's his name again?
So
Nick.
You got to the final two.
Yeah, I was the girl at the end in the white dress. They wanted to make it look very like the wedding was coming, you know, not actually a wedding, but it was me for publication. That didn't end well. And Laura from
He
home,
chose no one that season,
No, he chose
did he?
no one, yeah.
That must have felt better than if he'd have just chosen the other girl and not you.
It still feels pretty bad. Like it's never happened in the whole world to be the one that's like you've literally made it to the very end, but you're still not quite good enough.
Yeah.
But like,
I don't want either of you.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, but you know, no skin off my nose. But
We're over it now, aren't we?
We moved on.
Everything's fine.
Laura was sitting at home and she had watched what was happening. And also it's like this unspoken rule that you reach out to the next season, the girls at the end, because you're getting a lot of battles publicly. A lot of people start to troll you. You become a character to somebody. So everyone's either team A or team B and they let you know that. They really want to voice that. So Laura had gone through it the year before. She reached out to me. She said, I can see some stuff happening. I can see some people writing things to you. I've been through it. This is my number if you want to call me. And I don't think she'd even press send. And I called her. I was like, tell me it ends. You know, I was like, this is horrible. And then that was literally it. We saw each other in Bondi a couple of times, had a breakfast. It was only probably like our second meeting where I said to Laura, hey, I've got this crazy idea. I've always wanted to do a podcast and I didn't know who with. And I think you're as crazy as me. Should we do it together?
I probably am. So
yeah, and that was it.
How old were you both at the time?
So I was pregnant with Marley. When we started it and we had those sort of conversations.
When you met, how old were you?
Oh, I was 30.
30.
Oh, gosh. How old am I now? I'm 36. So I would have been 33, 32?
Yeah, well, I was 30. 30 on the show.
Yeah, 32.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, you know, a lot of people become famous through reality TV and particularly through The Bachelor. Very few of them have enduring fame and build something beyond, you know, the sugar hit, and maybe they do some other reality shows. You two are interesting because most people, well, many people wouldn't even know that you were both on The Bachelor. I came to know you both. I watched your season. I didn't watch your season, Laura, but I came to both know you sort of post that and never think about you in that way. I imagine the opportunities that you get after being that famous on reality TV, is it as important what you say no to as what you say yes to?
Oh, 100%.
What did you say no to and why?
I think for me, like I never ever had I never wanted to be an influencer. That was never my motivation. So I always had my business. I always had my career in Tony May, and that was really successful. And for me, that was my absolute love. So I never had to do jobs that I didn't want to do. And there have been jobs that I've done where halfway through I was like, this is yucky and I don't enjoy this.
Like what?
I won't
You don't want to say the brand.
dox the brand, but like,
No, but
so
what kind of thing?
Basically like some influencer work. So like I
a
thought,
food campaign or something. Or...
yeah, like, I mean, for example, you know, one, it was a company I liked, like a brand I liked. I've only ever worked with brands that I do actually use and like. But then when it came to the execution of the content.
And what they wanted, the content that they wanted you to create for their brand.
Exactly. The way they wanted me to voice the content, the things they wanted me to say about maybe it's their key messaging or their brand guidelines or whatever. It became very marketing driven and not in my voice. And at the start, I would do some of these jobs and I would just feel so yuck about it. And that quickly and very, very quickly made me realize that like, I don't need to do this. So I'm only going to work with brands who allow me to be like really authentic in the way that I communicate stuff. And if they don't like it, I can say no to it because it's not my only thing. And I think that can be the problem when you're an influencer, if that's your only revenue stream, it's very hard to say no when that's where all of your money comes from.
I mean, even just this week, I don't know if you did as well, but I said no to a lot of money, a lot of offers for the racing. I just didn't want to be involved in it. And I'm lucky that I have other streams of income also, that I don't have to do those things.
Because not every influencer could say no.
Totally.
Exactly. So honestly, like, I'm not here to judge anyone on what they do, and I never do. Like, if you want to go to the races, I'm not judging you, but I will happily say no to something that I don't feel comfortable or I don't really want to do.
And that was because you both had jobs before and after reality TV. So you both went on to find love, really, or did you go on?
No,
Laura,
I found nothing. I'm still looking.
No, but I mean, you went. Your motivation to go on.
I thought you meant
was to find
you meant
love.
you went on in life and found love. I was like, nope, still out there.
You went on the show to find love.
Don't know where you heard that.
Laura, you went on. You found love.
I went on for an experience. Like, I'm very, very practical and quite stubborn. And I think when I actually signed up for the show, in the back of my head, I was like, how could anyone be so stupid to actually fall in love in a reality TV setting? It's so contrived. It can't possibly be real. So it was a real surprise to me when I did fall in love in that setting. And I, fool me once, prove me wrong. I was very quick to admit that I had made some assumptions around reality TV. And I guess for me, like, I just went on and signed up for The Bachelor because I was like, it's an experience. I'm single. Why wouldn't I do it?
I work for myself.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who then go on and do lots of other reality shows. So you can become like a professional reality show person, and Dancing with the Stars, and I'm a Celebrity Get Me Out of Here, and Celebrity MasterChef.
The challenge is coming out in
I'm on
2 weeks.
I'm on one in
all
2
of
weeks.
them. No shade on any of that. But I imagine that you both get offered all of them. How do you decide what you're going to do and what you're not going to do? Is it money?
I mean, there's definitely some I would love to do I haven't been offered. Like, I would love to do fun things like Dancing with the Stars, like that kind of stuff, because I'm like, they all get ripped, like they get hottest bodies. So I'm like, great, if I can dance
I can't
and look
believe
hot.
you haven't been offered that.
No.
I've been offered that.
Have you?
A million times.
Mia, I'll let you in on a hot secret.
should
I've
do
never
it.
ever been offered a single reality TV show after The Bachelor.
No.
I wouldn't want to do them. That was me sounding stubborn. I don't want it anyway. But
like
no, I've never.
Survivor?
Nothing. I think for me, I've been pregnant a lot, like a lot since coming off the back of The Bachelor, and I have obviously 2 very small kids. So maybe from a TV executive perspective, like every time it's aligned with things, I have been very, very pregnant, which probably from an OH&S perspective doesn't go down well with a reality TV show.
SAS.
But I've never been asked, ever, never.
We can't send you to the jungle and make
Dancing
you
with
eat
the Stars.
spiders.
No, I mean, I've got a
Not
show
good for the baby.
I'll do it, anything, sign me up.
We've had this conversation. We're like, oh, do you think we'll get asked to do a show this year? Because we don't get asked. We don't know.
Bizarre.
But I do have the challenge coming out in 2 weeks. I finally did one. It's 5 years since The Bachelor.
You did Paradise as well. You've done a couple.
I said no to Paradise, and then they
Bachelor in Paradise, which is when
then
they
they
send you
suckered
to an
me in
island.
the 2 years later. And
Yeah.
that, you know why I did it? Because Laura goes, it'll be great for the podcast, great content.
Yeah.
Content.
So she
Great
made me go in, and I didn't
And
want to
what's
do
the
it.
one that you've done the challenge? What's that?
MTV The Challenge. So imagine if SAS, Survivor, Big Brother had an orgy and had a baby, it'd be The Challenge.
I'm out.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I'm
sounds
out.
exhausting.
Like, it
So
sounds
it's like-
hard work.
it's physical.
all orgies sound exhausting to me.
It's 50% physical. Like, some are really hard challenges, some are maths and puzzles and stuff you got to
Oh.
work out, and then the other half is just like drama central.
Sex.
I wanted no, not sex, but like just drama. Like, it's just like a Big Brother house. Put 22 people in a house, make them challenge all day, and then
I
you
think-
sit at home.
And so how do you avoid, obviously what the producers want is drama and bitch fights and blah, 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 and characters and the bad edit and whatever. You're an old hand. How do you avoid that shit?
I pretended to be asleep a lot. I hate the drama. And that, do you know, this is actually why I think I probably haven't been asked on a lot of reality TV shows. I remember on The Bachelor in the finale, I haven't really spoken about this that much, but they told me I was far too normal. They're like, you were too normal for reality TV, because they're like, your head's too screwed on. You've got way too much perspective and life experience, because they want these huge breakdowns and people that can't cope, because that makes good TV.
Much better TV.
Yeah, they don't want someone that's so sensible and can compartmentalize their feelings and just.
Yeah, they want people who cry a lot, and we're not big
I was a bit of a
criers.
sociopath when Nick dumped
can
me.
tell.
Yeah, even when Nick dumped me, I just said nothing, and I said, "Are you finished?" And he said, "Do you have questions?" I said, "No,
remember.
no questions." And I walked off, and then one little tear, and that's it. And I was like, "I'm done. I'm not even going to shed a tear for him."
I want to ask you guys about friendship, because you met when you were already at really different stages in your life. And often people become friends when they're in the same stage. And then sometimes one will have children, one won't, you'll take different paths. But you were already there when you became friends.
Yeah.
How has that manifested in, I want to ask you about E for envy in friendships, because Britt, you've been public about your desire to have a family and meet a person. You were already on that path when you guys met. I want to ask you first, Britt, how have you managed that?
I mean, I'll speak a little bit on behalf of Laura, what I think happens, and obviously you're going to speak it for yourself. There has been a level, I think, of, and I don't love the word jealousy, with each other, and not in a way other than there's parts of each other's life that we sometimes wish we could have.
Because I didn't say, if I were you, Laura, I'd be jealous that she doesn't have two little kids.
And that's exactly.
She's got freedom to travel, do all those things, have sex with new people.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And it is a bit sad too. Laura and I are such good friends. We see each other every single day. There is not one day in 4 years we haven't spoken multiple times, not one day. But our friendship's very strange because it's full-time work and we have these other lives. We actually don't get to go out and have a friendship anymore. We don't get to go to dinner anymore. We don't get to do anything. We go and we're 100 miles an hour. We're at work. We're work mode. And then we leave because we have all these other things to do. And when we do, we went out a little while ago, and it was so nice. We were just laughing. We're having a great time. We're like, we miss that we actually are friends and not just business partners. But there are parts of Laura where I'm like, I get really sad because I'm like, I look at her family, and a segment on the radio last week, it's about Matt and Laura's relationship and getting married, and I cry, and I cry from happiness, but I cry because I'm like, I wish I could have that feeling. And I see her with the kids and I'm like, I wish I could have that. And I know that Laura looks at me being like, fuck, you can wake up and you can go for a run if you want. You can do whatever you want. You don't know what responsibility is. And she envies that. But I think because we're both we're very honest communicators with each other. It's never any maliciousness in our envy at all. We're always very supportive of each other. But yeah, I've never looked at Laura and been jealous because she's gotten something I haven't, or in that way. It's never
more
like
just the pang of
and like, I feel like even in the way you described it, Britt, like we spend so much time together every single day, and like we still get to be in our friendship during our work hours. It's not like we're at work now, so we're not friends, and then we don't spend any time together. Like we are
we're
such
together all
good
day.
friends. But then in terms of like being able to just like go out for dinner, like I don't have time to just go out for dinner. And I think the thing I get jealous of is more so the fact that I work, obviously, and then I go home to 2 babies. Then are not always good sleepers, so they're up during the night. So like I never get time off. And I feel like a lot of working mums feel like this, like especially in the first years of having small children, there is no break. And I'm so lucky. I shouldn't say I'm lucky, but I'm very grateful that Matt is incredibly hands-on and he does a good 50% of the parenting load. It's not uneven in our household. If anything, he probably does more at the moment than me.
Men say, I'm just so grateful
No.
that my partner
They don't say that.
is such a good mum and helps with
That's what I mean. But we're being conditioned. But you know what?
I agree.
I am lucky because there's so many mums out there who don't have an equal partner.
Of course.
So the thing I get jealous of it with Matt and I get jealous of it with Britt is I don't get me time to go to the gym. I don't get me time to go for a walk. So even with Matt, his workload is slightly less than mine. So when he doesn't have the kids, he has 2 hours to go to the gym. But I'm either at work or I have the kids. And then when the kids go to bed, I work again. So that's my trying to fit everything in around the life that I've chosen, which is to be a mum. And I love every part of that. But it just means that when your priorities reshuffle, what I think I didn't understand, and something I mentioned in the book, is that not only do your priorities change, but you become the bottom of the priority list. And that's how I feel about myself sometimes.
It can be really annoying for people without kids that people with kids always, like their needs, it's like, oh, but I've got kids, so therefore we have to move the podcast, therefore I can't do that opportunity, I can't travel for the tour. How do you manage the pissed offedness of that? Not at Laura personally, but like that must get annoying.
I'm such an easy person that like I can change the podcast for any time to suit the kids really, unless I've got something locked in advance, because it's like it was harder when I was at the hospital because I had 12-hour shifts. So we would record it 5 a.m., 1 a.m., whenever I'd be in scrubs, Laura would bring the babies to work. Like Marley would be at whatever time. It was
under the recording desk, or Marley would be strapped to me and we'd just get through it and get on it.
But we are actually, and I know people out there would love to hear different. I know they'd love to hear that we argue and we fight with each other. But if one of us says, I can't do this time, we're like, it's cool. We'll make it work. We'll just have to do 8 p.m. Tuesday. Like,
what was it like working through COVID?
In the hospital?
Yeah.
Oh, I just like hats off to every healthcare worker. It was just exhausting. It's because it was 10 times busier, but every single job took twice as long or 3 times as long. And that's because of the precautions you had to take, just what you had to wear to see a patient. Every single room after a patient came in had to have this deep clean, but the cleaners weren't available. So put your list back.
You're a radiologist.
I'm a diagnostic radiographer. So
what does that mean?
Anyone that comes into a hospital will need a diagnosis. So that's me. So MRI, CT, ultrasound, X-ray. If you're in a car crash, you come to me. If you have cancer, you come to me.
Do you do the actual
I do the scanning, yeah.
Scanning, and you look at it and do you tell the patient? Do you tell the doctor?
Depends what it is. If it's cancer, no, never, ever. If it's anything serious, no. If it's a broken bone, yeah, because I can't let that person go home and it's not life ending. So I'm like, hey, you've broken this. We need to go send you back to this specialist now. So we do that. So there's a level that you have to self-regulate in the environment. You know what you can and can't do and what you can and can't say, and it's always dependent on case by case.
You write in the book, Laura, about attachment theory and how it was a real aha moment for you learning about how the relationships that are modelled for you when you're younger become blueprints subconsciously often for relationships you go on to have. You had a really volatile part of your childhood when your mother, her partner was a heroin addict and your house was really volatile. How old were you then?
So when Mum and Alex met, I would have been about maybe 5 years old. My parents divorced when I was 3 and my mum met Alex a couple of years later, and then they got married and they were together for about 8 years.
It's a really long time.
To me, it's my whole primary school is what I remember that time. I just remember being like truly fucking petrified all the time, like so petrified of him. He was so unpredictable in the way that he would react to things. You didn't know whether you were going to cop a beating or whether he was going to scream at you. And obviously that was to do with his drug addiction, but he was also very good at keeping it from my mum. So he did a lot of stuff behind my mum's back. And it got worse and worse. As his addiction got worse and worse, he got more violent and Mum didn't know. So it's really heartbreaking for my mum because he was very good at hiding his addiction. And I think when they got together, even though he was always quite scary to us, he wasn't addicted at the time that they got together, and then he got back into drugs. So he was a rehabilitated addict who fell back into drugs after my mum and him got together. By then my mum was so invested in the relationship. She didn't want to have a second failed relationship. But then when she left Alex, she had a newborn baby, my brother. So when things got really bad and really quite scary in our household was when my mum was heavily pregnant. And then she had my brother and a couple months later she left him.
Did you ever see him again?
I never spent time with him again or anything like that. I remember seeing him a couple of times as in passing, driving down the street, and just like I remember seeing him walking and just like that feeling of like, there he is. I don't ever remember seeing him again. I don't remember him coming to the house. I think it was very much like once it was severed, he was gone. He had a small bit of contact with my brother for a little while, very, very intermittent. But also I think if anything, once the separation had taken place, he went and started a whole new life, had a whole new family. Like his life completely it was like that chapter didn't exist to him.
What did it teach you about relationships and who were you inadvertently attracted to?
So for me, I think the attachment styles, the conversation around it was a really interesting one because I grew up after that period of my life, which when I think about it and I spend time on it, it makes me truly, really upset. But as an adult, I've always sort of been like, I'm not defined by my past. And I kind of wore it as a badge of honor that I had that period of my life, but it didn't define who I am as a person. And I used to kind of, if we ever spoke about it or I told anyone about it, people were always shocked and they'd sort of be like, yeah, but look at how amazing you are. Like I took a lot of pride in that. But in the same token, I watched my mum stay in a relationship for a really long time with someone who was really abusive. I also saw that my mum got a lot of value from being in relationships. I don't really remember her ever being single, like completely single. And I think as I grew up, from when I was 18 years old, I was always in a relationship. I always had sort of like another relationship lined up if one relationship was ending. Like it was just this constantness. I was like long-term monogamous, but I would stay in relationships with people they were never abusive towards me, but they were not necessarily supportive towards me, or they cheated on me. But I would just, my standard for what I expected out of a relationship.
Someone is better than being alone.
100%. And it was so low. It was so low. And I think I came out of a really bad relationship just doing The Bachelor, where he had cheated on me multiple times. He had sex addiction issues. And I remember sitting there thinking, well, maybe we can try an open relationship, because then at least then he's not cheating on me, so he can go and be with other people, but I won't be with other people, just so that he would stay with me. And thinking about that now makes me just feel sick. Like how crazy it was that my standards didn't even exist, because I
gave it a label. It wasn't bad because you're like, oh no, we're in a relationship. It's not cheating.
And so as things eroded over time, my standards just got so incredibly low. And I also had this idea in my head that in order to have a loving relationship, you had to oscillate between these crazy highs and these really big lows. And that's what love was. Because for me, that's what I've always seen it to be. You know, as a kid, that's what it was. That's what it was defined as. And so I guess for me, I grew up thinking, without realizing it, that was an acceptable way to be in a relationship. And it wasn't until I really sort of did some research into kind of what attachment theory was, like how your role models in life who show you what a relationship is kind of like have this blueprint for how you show up in your relationships, that I started to really unpack, oh, maybe my childhood affected me in ways that I wasn't aware of. And also I think meeting Matt, and he's just the most stable, loving, consistent. We don't have these crazy highs, but we don't have these crazy lows. It sits in this really amazing space between being comfortable and being exciting. And I think with that stability, it made me realize just how dysfunctional my past relationships were, but I always thought that they were normal.
After the break, Britt opens up about what it's like being paid to talk about dating and relationships while she was going through the most heart-wrenching, gut-churning breakup of her life, and it wasn't for the reasons that you might think. When your livelihood and the content that you make is around sex and relationships, and you're living it in real time, Britt, for you, you've had public loves. I mean, it's all been lived out there. You had a really hard breakup earlier this year. What happened? You were dating a tennis player?
Yeah, I mean, I was single for the best part of 10 years. Like, I don't classify the Bachelor and Nick and all that as dating. Like, that's, you know. So, best part of a decade. And I fell wildly, deeply, madly in love.
How did you meet?
On Raya, which is the dating app, for anyone who doesn't know.
Exclusive dating app.
It's the fancy dating app. Like, you have to be famous or have a certain number of followers.
No, you have to be
hot.
Accepted.
You have to be hot.
Oh, no, you don't have to. Trust me.
It's like an invite only.
You have to be accepted by them, but generally you have to have a referral. So you have to say that someone's on there that you know, then they go to that person and they ask them, and then they let you on.
And how is it different behind this golden rope? How is it different to Bumble, Tinder, Hinge?
It's not geography based. So you could match with anyone around the world. It started because these huge Hollywood stars were traveling for work and they were getting to a city, and then they were lonely and they couldn't hang out with anyone else because no one else got it, and it was a different world. So it almost started like that, so that other people could be like, oh, do you want to get a drink? I'm filming this as well, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it just grew exponentially into, because you can just be on there for friends. But yeah, I met Jordan. He's a tennis player. We met on there, and it was just the fastest relationship. We fell in love within a few weeks. And
was he Australian?
He's Australian, yeah, but he plays on the tour, so he's not here. And that was part of the problem. He was here a couple of weeks a year. And he's a lot younger than me, so he's got a lot of time left on the circuit.
How old were you when you met?
I was 33 and he, oh God, for a couple of months he was 26.
It's a safe space. That's not a big gap.
7 years.
That's not a lot.
Yeah, 7 years. Yeah. But I never once felt it. Never, ever felt the age difference.
Do you know what's so funny? Because you say it with like such hesitation, but if the age gap was reversed, no one would even blink an eye. Like if you were a guy and you were dating someone,
he was like 19.
No.
Yeah, if you were dating if you're a guy and you were dating a woman 7 years younger, no one would even fucking care.
Do you know what it is though? It's not the 7 years. I don't care about saying that. It was saying 26.
Yeah, 26 does sound young, doesn't
7
it?
years is fine, but when you say 26, but yeah, I mean he was quick to turn 27, but officially 27.
He was quick.
He was quick to turn 27.
We sped it right up.
But because he's been a professional athlete since he was 17. He's been traveling the world alone forever. He was very mature. I'd never felt an age difference. And we felt madly in love and, talked about the future and getting married, and we were just obsessed. And then we just realized that it couldn't work. Like if I'm too driven and too embedded in a career here, and I spent 5 months on a tour with him, and we did Wimbledon and the US Open, and it was amazing. And I loved seeing all the families and wives traveling with their partners, and I also enjoyed it. But I would be at his court. I would be at his matches on my laptop because I still had to work. I got stuck over there in COVID. I got stuck there for 5 months. I couldn't fly back, and I experienced what tour life would be, which if I wasn't so driven back here would be wonderful. But he was never going to ask me to give up my career and go there. And I was like, I'm never going to ask an athlete to, that's what you do. I'm never going to ask him to stop his job. So I think because of that.
It was literally a geographical impossibility. It wasn't that there was no love. It wasn't.
No, we loved each other a lot. It was a long breakup. The breakup went for months, didn't it, Laura? It was like we couldn't.
But also, so like I think dating a professional sports player is such a hard thing to do in terms of if you're a woman who prioritizes their career, because as a professional sports player, you have to be selfish in some ways. You have to be number one in order to have your head in the game to be the best at your sport.
Beck Hewitt had to give up her career. I can't think of a professional, except for Serena Williams. I was going to say I can't think of a professional tennis player whose partner has a full-time job.
Yeah. Interesting that it's the other gender though, isn't it?
Exactly.
Interesting that it's
Funnily
a
enough.
female who's the professional sports player and the man still has a career. But I would say that, and I don't think I can say it across the board because I'm sure there's exceptions to the rules, but most professional male athletes, their partners have to make compromises and sacrifices in order to be there to support them.
It's called being the trailing spouse.
Well, he always said that too from day one. And he's like, not in a bad way. He's like, but you need to know that I have to be selfish in my sport. Like my physio, my training, my traveling, my matches, everything is going to come first. It doesn't mean I don't love you, but I have to do that. And then I can get to you at the end of the day or whatever it is. Yeah.
And what was it that made you go, I just need more than this?
Do you know what? In all honesty, it was probably more him. We both agreed that it wasn't working, but I would have tried for probably a little bit longer, I think. Every part of me knew that it wasn't going to work, but I just wasn't ready to let go. And I think that's conversations Laura and I had where I was like, I could keep going for another year like this. Laura's like, you're not going to see him. What's the end goal?
Yeah.
He doesn't even think he wants kids. So there were a lot of things, but I wasn't ready to because I hadn't experienced that. I'd get upset. I hadn't experienced that love for so long, and it was beautiful. I felt good, and I wasn't ready to let it go. I get really upset.
I know, but
why would you be ready to let it go?
Even though I knew, and that's the thing. Sometimes you can love someone, and it cannot be right, and you can still love them. And that's what we were. Yeah.
And I think also the added layer of
look at your mother.
Complexity.
Like she loved him, and it was so not right, but she loved Alex, your stepfather.
Totally. And, my mum's remarried now and she has an incredible partner who is so supportive and so stable and wonderful and everything. But it took my mum until her 40s, late 40s to meet someone who provided that for her in her life. It's been a very long time for her to get to that. But I think the other thing that was really hard for Britt and also for that period, having a relationships podcast where you dish out advice on the best thing to do when you're in a relationship and the right thing to do to save your own mental health, to have self-preservation and to have boundaries and all that sort of stuff, which is the things we talk about.
There's the practical, but then it's the heart wants what the heart wants.
And then to do the opposite, it was like, Britt was like, I know what I would say to myself if I was a person who was writing in this question, but I don't want to do that. And it's so easy sometimes to give advice and so hard to live it.
Well, I mean, to answer your question, because I forgot that's where we started. I just went to a therapy session. It is hard, yes, because I was going through a breakup and everyone wanted to know about it, and the Daily Mail was speculating about it, and certain horrible podcasts out there that I won't name were, trying to write stories about it. And if you're living that, you're not ready. I didn't know what it was myself, and people were demanding an answer.
Yeah, people are like, you're not together. And you're like, but we're not together. We're just in this weird
God.
grey
Like, tell us
area of life.
I remember getting messages saying, you owe us an explanation. And I was like, wow, like, actually, no, I don't. And I will give you one when I'm ready to. Like, so that it is difficult being so open, a lot of vulnerability, and a lot of what Laura and I share. People think that means they're entitled to every single part of you because you do share a lot, but that's not it. There are parts of Laura and I that we have never spoken about, and we will never. There are parts that people think we tell everything. We definitely don't.
Yeah.
So that was a battle.
It was interesting. I was talking to Sophie Keisha about this after she announced that she'd ended her engagement with Maddie Garrick, and I actually wrote a piece about how it happened also to Abby Chatfield, how their relationships ended and then everybody demanded details, like with you. It's like, you owe us. And, you know, the argument being, well, you shared all the good stuff. We have a right somehow. And what Sophie was saying is, well, I actually didn't share everything. Like, people think that we share everything, Abby and you and her, and it's not true. And people even think that of me sometimes. It's like, you don't. You share what you are willing to share. And sometimes the best place to share from is a scar, not a wound. And people asking you to share from an open wound,
that's a
is
really good
brutal.
saying. I've never heard that. I like that.
Well, also, I think nobody really knows. You never know how you feel about something when you're in the moment. That's not a
No.
real feeling. We all know that, like, for example, if you get cheated on, you're fucking angry, you're sad, you're crazy with emotion.
You've got no perspective.
Yeah, and you might be like, I would never stand for it. The relationship's over. And then things cool. And then you have time to talk. And then you see them again and you're like, oh, you're not this horrible monster that I created in my mind. You're still the person that I loved 3 months ago. And I still, you know what? Let's try and work it out. And then the feeling that you have 3 months after an event is not the feeling that you have when you're in the event, because of exactly what you said, because of having perspective, because of having a little bit of distance from it. So I think sometimes, even coming back to that idea of self-preservation, you can't talk about things when it's happening because you just don't know how you feel about it.
But look
it's not
at me
true.
now, like 10 months on, I still can't talk about it properly without, I know how I feel, but I still get upset talking about it. Imagine me trying to talk about it in the midst of it. Like, it would have been impossible.
When you said about the age gap, it wasn't that he was 26. It was 7 years can be a small gap or a large gap depending on what life stage you're at. And for a woman in her early 30s and mid and late 30s, it's 100 years. Like, that gap suddenly really widens because my son and his partner have a 7-year age gap, and they've got those conversations too, because she's in her early 30s and she wants to have kids, and she wants to have more than one kid, and she doesn't have the luxury of just, well, let's just see what happens, or let's just wait a few years.
Time. We don't have the luxury of time.
Did you freeze your eggs?
Yeah, I froze my eggs. I went for my consult and I met Jordan the same day. It was like life was like, oh, cool, you've made that decision to do that. Now I'm going to go and give you something to work on.
Someone who doesn't want to have kids for a very long time. Thank goodness you put them on ice.
Yes, but I froze them 15. I got 15 little suckers, 15 mini Brittany's on ice somewhere. But for everyone listening that doesn't know about egg freezing, 15 on ice might mean 5 make the thawing process and are actually viable. Like, it's always less than half, they say. So I did that. I'm 35 now, single. Don't know if there's a prospect of children or not. I won't go down the path at this stage alone. I know that. Personal decision. I don't think I want to do that alone. I don't have family here. It would just be a very big decision. If I was obsessed with becoming a mother, that's a different story. But for me, it's a level of, I would love to go down that path one day with the right person and the right family. So at least now I have that option. But I also still have to decide if I want to do it again, because
The egg freezing again?
Yeah, 15's not a huge amount, because there's no guarantee even one of them will work or will take. And yeah, I'm 35. We know what happens every single year. Our eggs are deteriorating, and eventually I'll have none of them left. So
What is the most annoying thing people say to single women?
oh, fuck, where's the have you got time?
Please.
There's a list.
So much.
Do you know, there's a few. One of them is just stop looking for it. It'll come. Just stop looking. Okay, well, and then the other person's like, you need to look more, like go out and date. you know, it's not going to come to you in your lounge
He's
room.
right around the corner.
Yeah, he's right around the corner. Maybe your standards are too high. I get that a lot. Maybe your standards are too high. And I'm like, well,
do you get it from men? Like,
Settle,
like crappy men
settle.
being like, maybe
Settle,
you're,
bitch.
like who said? Is it women who say it, or is it men who say your standards are too high?
Both.
Because I think men saying it is an interesting one. They're like, they don't meet the standards, so therefore it's not them. It's that the standards too high.
A lot of women say it.
Really?
Yeah. A
A lot of women in relationships say it.
Yeah.
They're like, you're single. I know another single person. You should date him.
Why
don't
not?
you date him? And it's like, because I don't want to.
What do you think's
Your
wrong with
standards
you?
are too high.
Yeah,
But
what's
also,
wrong with you?
I know a lot of people who are in relationships and their relationships are crappy. Like, I'd rather have standards and be single than not have standards and be in a relationship that's miserable. You know?
Is there a lot of yeah, but that's easy for you to say. I mean, yes, that's also true.
But it's also easy for me to say only because I've been in the relationships that have been crappy. And with perspective,
so true.
It's much more fulfilling to have control over your happiness than to be volatile, but by somebody constantly pulling on the strings of it.
I would rather be single than settle. I know that. Yeah. I would.
Is there a degree of condescension
Yeah.
among coupled women?
Yeah, there's I mean,
It's like,
I
oh.
often wonder if it's cloaked in a little bit of jealousy, like we spoke about before, and not jealousy of me as a person, but jealousy of I can date whoever I want. I could kiss 5 people this week.
You
I could sleep with 3 people this weekend. I could, you know, so I feel like there's a lot of it cloaked in that. It doesn't often bother me now. I get these comments so often for the last 10 years. My mum's hilarious, actually. My mum she sent me a photo the other day of a vet. She took her dog to the vet. And then
Oh, dear.
not even here, the vet's in a country town. And she said, I think Delilah needs to get sick so you can come down here and take to the vet. He's really cute. I think he's single. And I was like, Mum, what are you doing? Like she just, if it's
pimpmydaughter.com.
She is. She meets someone at the coffee shop and she messages me to tell me about it. I'm like, Mum, this is just
Mum, you
because
live in
2
Port
people
Macquarie.
just because 2 people are single doesn't mean. Oh, she's like, oh well, I don't know. I was just trying to help you out. I'm like, I'm doing okay.
Just because he's a man roughly between the ages of 20 and 40.
But
Over 6 foot.
With a
Laura
pulse.
knows I am like I shoot my shot a lot. I don't know how to say this in any other way, but I can get very confident because I think there's nothing to lose. So I will message. I have messaged Hollywood stars. Like,
Yeah.
I've messaged my hall passes. They often write back, but I'm like,
I think you'd be good with Chris Brown, Dr. Chris.
Oh,
I'm sure a lot of
no, they're
people have said
friends.
that.
yeah.
Oh, your
Oh,
mates.
people have said that about us for
Okay.
years, but
Yeah,
we've
I'm
been
sure
friends
it's
for a
not
long
original.
They're friends.
time. Everyone says it.
And it's just annoying because it's like you just seem great together. Can you just be together? Like, can we just tick
Chris, you
that off?
listening or?
Yeah. bloody
Nah,
hell.
he's a great guy. I'd actually love
Speaking
the
of
free
vets.
free vet care as
Yeah,
well.
it'd be great. So expensive vet care.
No, but I think I love being single. I don't want anyone to think that I'm complaining
No,
about being
let's
single.
talk about the good bits about it.
It's so fun. I love it. I don't have anyone to look after. I don't have to think about anyone else. It's just me. I went on an amazing date last night, actually.
I did see that you went to the Ivy Bar.
Oh, 1 a.m. at the Ivy
Posting
Bar. Who am I?
cocktails. Who are you?
I don't know who I am, but hot.
You're that
super hot.
person. Yes.
There's a lot
okay.
of, like when you're single, I used to call it single energy. I would have a lot more energy to stay out late because there's always the potential I could meet someone, I could meet someone, I could meet someone. Do you find that or is that just pressure?
No, I don't think about it like that. I just go out, like producer Keisha and we go out a lot together because she's single as well. And we have a great time. We don't go out to look for people.
No.
We go out together. But I have this, I don't think I've spoken about this before, and I don't know if there's a word for it. Maybe we could do an episode on it. For somebody that wants a relationship, I have always had this level of anxiety when I'm dating or I've met someone. It happened with Jordan. It happens with people now. If I'm dating them and I'm like, oh, like that could be something. I have a level of anxiety that they could be it and that I would never be with anyone else again. And I don't know what to do with that feeling because I'm like, what are you doing, Brittany? You're 35. This is a great person. Why are you scared of getting into a relationship in case it's it? Because then I thought, oh, I can't go out. I could never kiss anyone again. I can't date anyone. And I don't know what to do with the feeling.
Do you also think though, and maybe you don't have to do anything with it, like it feels like that should be a normal thing. Being single has been such a part of your identity for so long. You have had such agency over every decision you make. You haven't had to consider anyone. And then all of a sudden you're in a situation where you have to consider another person. Like, what am I doing tonight? I don't know. I have to check with that person. Like it's
not
almost like
that.
accountability for
Well, it's
something.
the opportunity cost of not being single.
Totally.
It's opportunity
Yeah.
cost.
And it's a
the
change in
opportunity
identity as well, you know, like it's just you fully moving into a different part and a different phase of life.
Yeah, I just feel like I'm not ready to I always feel like I'm
the
like
new chapter.
I'm not ready to not be with anyone else
Yeah.
again. Like,
Yeah.
like I'm not ready to lock
Babe,
myself
no
in.
one is. You just
Yeah.
have to not think about it.
But I think
you
that's
agree?
why.
I'm getting married next week, guys.
But it's being single's great. It's so much fun. You learn so much about yourself. And I think that what I want to say to all the single people listening is that your time will come one day in life. It might be 20 years. It might be 10 years. It might be 5 years where you will meet someone. Enjoy this time. Don't look at it like it's so bad and you're at a loss and you wish you had a family. Just
Don't wish it away.
Positive. Don't wish the time away.
Yeah. You got pregnant, Laura, twice in 16 months. Well, 3 times in 16 months because you
Four
had
times in 16
You had
months.
2 miscarriages in between your 2 pregnancies. Do you not have fast internet or something? Like,
I got too much time.
Have you got nothing else?
I
Why?
don't know.
That's a lot of times.
Oh, it's only
a
3
lot
minutes.
of
It's only 3
times.
minutes.
Yeah. I mean, the chance of us getting pregnant now is probably a bit slimmer. We're not having as much sex as we used to, believe it or not.
Did you mean to get pregnant that many times?
The first time when we had a miscarriage was a complete accident. Like I was shell shocked, which I shouldn't have been. But no, I was on the pill. I was on the pill, so it was a shock. It was a shock.
And when you had that miscarriage, did you go like, "Oh, I didn't want it enough," and that's what? Like, were you a bit relieved?
It was almost the opposite. I was very worried about how Matt would react to the fact that I was pregnant, but I also was basing that on how I think my ex-partners would have reacted, which would have been to have said like, well, I don't want it. Like, you go and have an abortion.
How long had you been together?
We'd only been together for a year and a bit. So for me, that was so early. I knew that we wanted to be together. We talked about kids. That was not ambiguous, but we definitely didn't want kids then. And so I was actually away. I was in Bali at the time by myself. And I went to a little chemist and I went and got a pregnancy test. And I did a test in my hotel room and I was like, this is fucked. And I came home.
There's only 2 reactions to a pregnancy test, isn't there?
One, this is fucked.
Yeah.
And yes.
Like in tears, like did not know. I actually remember, this is how dumb it was. I actually remember Googling Sam and Snezana because they got pregnant really early after the Bachelor had just finished, then they got pregnant. And I was like, did they get pregnant like sooner than me? And I was like, oh no, definitely me. I think we'd only been together for 9 months. Anyway, I got home, I got off the plane. I got into the car and I was like, Matt, I need to talk to you about something I need to tell you. And he just looked at me and then he burst out laughing and he was like, you're pregnant, aren't you? And that was it. He was so happy. And then I think his ease with it and his happiness also made me realize that, yeah, we could do this and that I could, like that it made me happy as well. You know, it was I almost wanted his validation towards it because I didn't want to do it on my own, but I did want to have the baby. And then about 10 weeks later, I had a miscarriage, which was really devastating. And I don't think I had ever, I mean, I spoke about it before with you. I never knew how hard it was. I never knew like what my body was going to do. I didn't know anyone who had ever been through one. So I felt like there was something really wrong with me. And that was really quite a difficult couple of weeks for me. But it was through that process that Matt and I both made the decision that we wanted to have a kid and we just kind of would throw the timelines out and see what happened. And then a month later I was pregnant and that was Marley. And then we kind of did the same thing after she was born. She was maybe 9 months or 8 months or something. And we were like, she's so great. And she was an amazing baby. And we're like, this parenting thing is so easy. Let's have another one.
And then we got Lola.
And she was not easy. She was anything but easy. Now she's amazing. And now they're like the best of friends because they're so close together.
Very common mistake going, we can do this again.
Wow, the second one really knocked the
different.
cockiness out of me. She was a different kid.
And did you have a miscarriage in between that again?
So-
Intentional pregnancy, that one?
Yeah, intentional pregnancy. This is probably a horrible thing to say, but looking back, I'm grateful that we didn't end up having our kids that close. The age gap would have been under a year. And I think how much I struggled with Lola and going to the transition of 2 children, had that been even earlier. Like I look back on photos of Marley when I had Lola and she was still a baby, a complete little baby. And we would have had a baby 4 months earlier than that. So it just way too soon.
I remember that. And I say I remember that. I remember exactly where I was in the car. I was driving up Bondi Road and Laura called me because we were doing some work and she called me and she said, I'm miscarrying.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, well, sorry, what? She's because I obviously.
And you're like, wait, haven't you already had the baby?
No, so Laura had told me she was pregnant before Matt in this one. She was like, I'm not ready to tell him yet. I'll wait a little bit. And she's like, I'm miscarrying. I said, right now? She's like, yeah. And I said, do you want me to take you to hospital? She's like, no, I'll just let it happen. Anyway, like, let's get back to work. And I was like, hang on, like.
So you just started bleeding.
But that's what you do, right?
I know, but I just felt like it was like, we need to give this a minute and talk about this. And are you in pain? Do you need me to, you know? And she was like, no, it's like, unfortunately, you were like, I've done it. I've done this before. I'm sad. I know I just need to sit here and go through it and let my body literally like do what it's doing. And then She's like, but in the meantime, like, let's talk about work. You know, you were like, I just want to not pretend it's not happening, but you'd done it before, unfortunately. And you were like, I just want to deal with it later kind of thing.
It's such there's so many women who experience it, especially early pregnancy loss. Like,
did it happen at home both times for you?
No, it happened at work the first time.
But you didn't have to go to hospital.
I think the first time I probably should have, but it's for me.
You were further along.
Yeah, and for me, I guess like going to emergency seemed like such a severe thing to do, but doing nothing felt like it wasn't enough either. Like it's just there's the extremes between the two. I was like, what do I do? Like where do I go? Because I was like, it's not an emergency.
And what did you do?
The first time I went to emergency.
How did they sort of treat you there?
They just did some scans and said, yeah, you're having a miscarriage, go home, which is exactly the reaction I thought that they would have. I guess the validation of it was like very, very upsetting, but also reassuring almost in a way as well, because at least I knew what was happening.
And is that the kind of scan, Britt, that you would have done
they would have done blood tests and ultrasound scan, yeah.
But in when you were working in hospitals, was that the kind of thing that you would do?
It's what they would. Yeah, I personally wouldn't. I ran CT in emergency, but yes, they would call a sonographer in. Yeah.
And I guess like I called Britt, and I know we worked that whole week like it was almost just something that was happening. Because like it's what you have to do. You're a mum. You've got another kid. You've got to keep on getting up and getting on with things.
How was the second time different to the first, physically and mentally?
I mean, physically, I think that's the thing that I was both times the most unprepared for, how painful it is and how much bleeding there is.
Cramps,
like
blood.
Physical bleeding, I think that no one ever talks about it because we don't like to talk about bleeding. It makes everyone feel a bit uncomfortable, but the sheer volume of it is quite frightening. And so then you
not
almost
like a regular period.
No, and you almost think, well, I must be dying then, that this is because no one preps you and tells you that. Not even the doctors tell you that there's going to be that much bleeding. So your kind of head goes to the worst case scenario. The first time and second time were markedly different in that the first time I thought I was damaged goods. Like the first time I was like, there's something wrong with me. Like my body can't have kids. And something I spoke about in the book, I'd had an abortion in my 20s. And the first time I had a miscarriage, I was like, this is my punishment for that.
Babe.
This is, it makes me really upset to think about it. I was like, this is whatever karma there is that exists in the world is telling me that I fucked my body up and now I can't have kids. And I was like, then I went through the whole thing and I was like, Matt won't want to be with me if I can't have kids. And anyway, that was like a really shitty time.
Which is so not true. And you know that now. And also this is why it's so great that Laura speaks about it and we did the episodes on it, because what you felt is what all women feel when they're going through a miscarriage. Like that feeling is normal of like, oh, my body can't, something's wrong with me. My body can't do it. But because you've spoken about it, other women now know that it's not. That's not the thing. It's not their body. And some women, it is, unfortunately.
There is there's a sense of shame about it.
Totally. And a sense of like, well, I deserve this. That was how I felt the first time. But the second time was different. And I know that's not the case for everyone. It doesn't invalidate the second miscarriage. But I think I wasn't so hard on myself. I knew that I could have a baby, and I knew that like I could have a healthy, wonderful, just like an amazing little kid like Marley. I knew that I could do that because there she was, standing in front of me being the best. So I guess I didn't have as much hate towards what my body was doing, although I was sad because it was what we wanted. It wasn't, it was
a weird kind of grief, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's like you're grieving your future.
And I was like, well, I guess we'll just try again in a little while and then see what happens. And Matt was really good. Like he was amazing both times. He was really supportive and just I guess he kind of felt helpless, but he was also like, tell me what to do. Like, where do you need me and what should I do? And I was like, You can't do anything. It just is what it is.
When you look back at that first time now, do you still think that you were being punished?
No.
Or do you see it differently?
No, I see it differently, especially because I do have two amazing children.
Which you wouldn't have if those babies had been born.
I wouldn't have the life.
Or if you hadn't have had that abortion, it wouldn't have. That's the same thing. Right?
Well, yeah. And I mean, more so from the abortion perspective, but like, I wouldn't have the relationship I'm in. I wouldn't have the career I have. I wouldn't have the children I have. Like my life would be a completely different life if I hadn't made that decision in my 20s. And, I don't have regret for that decision at all. And I think when I was able to kind of separate the two, separate that feeling of like, well, this is my punishment, and actually really just understand that this is just something that so many women experience. It's an intrinsic part of bringing kids into the world and having children. For some women, they'll have multiple miscarriages and then they'll have multiple healthy babies. I just stopped hating myself around it. And also, the more I spoke about it, the more other women came forward. It's like this weird underground community that no one wants to be a part of. But as soon as you say, oh, I've had one, other people say me too. Yeah, even my mum, my mother-in-law, like everybody. My mum actually, I never knew this, but my mum had an ectopic pregnancy and she had a miscarriage that was a very severe one that she ended up in hospital with. And at the time, the police came to the hospital because they thought she'd aborted it herself.
And it was illegal.
And it was illegal back then. Yeah. And so she was going through a horrible miscarriage between me and my sister. Wow. And she was also being investigated for
what was going on inside her own body.
Yeah. And so she told me that when we started speaking about it. And I guess for me, I was like, wow, what a perspective change that was.
Well, that's a generation too where you didn't speak about it. Our parents' generation, you did not speak about miscarriages and abortions. Like it's
so
not
shameful.
It wasn't something you went and spoke to your friends over coffee with. Where I think now it's a different generation. We're definitely leaning more on each other and being more open about it because other people like yourself have been open about it.
Yeah.
Wasn't that a cracking conversation? I've made another bonus episode. If you are a Mamamia subscriber, you can hear it right now via the link in our show notes. In this bonus, I asked them what it's like living in the wake of cancel culture, how scared they are and what's happened when they have been cancelled in the past. And also, I had so many questions about how they deal with paparazzi stalking because both of them do get stalked by the paparazzi and so do their family and their new partners. And sometimes it can be relentless. And I really learnt so many things I had no idea about.
So when I first got spat out of the reality TV world, those articles made me hate myself, like truly hate myself.
The stories they tell are outrageous and a really good reminder of why at Mamamia we do not participate in the paparazzi economy and we never will. You can buy Laura and Britt's brilliant new book, We Love Love, right now. We'll put a link in the show notes for that too. The assistant producer is Emmeline Peterson and the executive producer is Eliza Ratliff with sound production by Madeline Joannou. I'm Mia Friedman. Thanks for having me in your ears.